Welcome to the episode of Life Stories with Marty. I'm Marty here in Melbourne, and thank you for joining us in Australia and all over the world. And we have Irish author and playwright Susan Connolly. She's got a new book coming out. It's called Echoes from the Dormitories. Now, Susan has an amazing story. So she grew up in the industrial schools in Ireland. Now, some of the subjects that we touch on may be disturbing to people, so I'm giving a trigger warning, but you will enjoy Susan's, and what we're going to do is we're going to cross over to Ireland now. She is on standby, so let's cross over to Ireland and have a chat with Susan. Susan, welcome to the show, and thank you for coming on. It's a great honor.
And it's a pleasure for me too, Marty. Lovely to see you there.
And what part of Ireland are you in at the moment for my listeners?
Well, I believe you're from this part of the world as well. At some point, I live in Newbridge in County Kildare.
Exactly. I was Curragh Camp, yes.
Right. Up the road just from me here.
Yes. Oh, it's an honor, and your book, I want to go into your book. Well, you've done many books, but I want to go into your book, Echoes from the Dormitories. But I want to start off because it's life story. So, Susan, if I can just kick off and let you talk. I don't want to keep interrupting. It's your stories. Tell us where you grew up, what your life was going like, and what kind of, I think you know, and just people will be reading your book and go into it. So I'm handing the mic over to you.
Well, thank you, Marty. Well, obviously my life and the kind of life I have led really brought me to put this all down in a book form, because I carried secrets, you could say, for my entire life to protect other people, Marty. But if I start at the very beginning, I don't have any information on my parents or anything like that. I was born in St. James's Hospital here in Dublin, and at 636 days old, which is only a baby, obviously, I was transferred to St. Patrick's Mother and Baby Home on the Navan Road. I was placed there for approximately 2 weeks, and after 2 weeks, I was made a ward of court. From there, I was transferred to St. Joseph's Industrial School for Girls, which is in Kilkenny. And at some point in 1959, when I'm coming up to 2 years of age, I was taken by a parent. I think it was my father. I spent my life looking for documentation on my early, my infancy years. And it's very hard to get that kind of information. And when you do, there's always redacted statements. There's always things missing. Yeah. So I kind of pieced together my own, how it happened, so to speak. So I was taken anyway from St. Joseph's Industrial School for Girls. I believe I have a sibling at this point, a little brother, and we were taken to England. Now, I believe at this point, my parents probably did meet up and try to create a little nest and start all over again. I don't know. I'm just putting those bits together myself. Yeah. So again, unknown reasons, I was taken from their accommodation. Now I have memories of little flashbacks of quite a chaotic scene, of doors bursting open and a child being removed and myself being picked up and taken from this property, and we were transferred then to the Southern Railway Orphanage for Children in Woking, Surrey. Now, according to paperwork, they always try to get a parent to pay for a child's keep, especially in those days. They would do their best to locate a parent and set up these orders for them to pay a maintenance towards our keep. Now, I don't know whether that happened or not, but for some reason, we were taken again from the Southern Railway Orphanage and sent to the Sisters of Nazareth, which is in Bexhill-on-Sea. Now, my understanding would be that they located a parent or the parents in that area. And once they followed that trail, then they would send the children off to that area as well. Yes. So we stayed in the Sisters of Nazareth. And again, according to paperwork, my father was deported from England. I don't know why. Okay, so I don't have that information. Yeah. He returned to Ireland. Now, my father was Catholic, and you know, the Catholic Church has a very strong hold, a very powerful organization back in the day, very, very powerful. So if a parent was Catholic, I don't think my mother was Catholic actually, so they followed the father's trail. We were then shipped across to Ireland, and that's how I ended up in Goldenbridge Industrial School with my two siblings now at this stage. We ended up in Goldenbridge Industrial School in Dublin. And that's where I think my own horrors began. And I can only tell it from my own perspective.
And Susan, just for our listeners here in Australia, what is an industrial school?
A lot of people in the day would call it an orphanage, but it's a place for displaced children. If maybe, you know, a relative may die, a parent may die, and the other parent can't look after or manage on their own. I do believe that in those days, they would seek, the institutions would seek any opportunity to take a child, because we were money, you know, generators. Because for every child that they had in an institution, the government paid them X amount to keep them there. And if you were made a ward of court, and there's a court document that sentences you to, in my case, until I was 16 years of age, it would be very, very hard for a parent to actually get you back. Because once you were made, it's almost like a prison sentence. Once that document...
I'm sorry, Susan, I'm curious, why were you put in there in the first place?
Again, maybe my parents couldn't manage. Maybe my father was an alcoholic, an extreme alcoholic now. He would disappear, I believe, for weeks, days. He probably left my mother in England alone. I don't know. My mother was only 15 when she fell pregnant with me, a child. Whoa. Okay, so a child. So a child with a baby, then another baby, and then another baby. So there was 3 of us, you know, that I was aware of at the time. She was 16 when she gave birth to me. And I suppose without the support of her own family, because her own mother was single and, you know, for trying to make ends meet, and probably saw all the red flags that my mother didn't see, and said, if you want to be with that Irish fella, off you go. And of course, it didn't work out. Maybe the social workers may have someone may have informed that we weren't being looked after. I can't answer all of the questions. I can only go on the snippets of information that I've managed to get myself. But it was always very hard to get information from a parent anyway, because I didn't want to bring up anything that would cause them. I didn't want to lose them at one point, because I was, you know, I wanted to keep them in my life, and drawing up all of these old memories, I felt would push them further away. So I didn't really go down that road of asking too many questions. Plus, it was very hard. They weren't together at this stage when I met them. They had remarried and had other children. And as sad as it is for me to say this, you know, because I don't like hurting people, I do feel that they got on with their lives and we were left behind and forgotten about. That's how it felt like from my perspective.
That's you're very articulate. I love the way you tell it. It's so honest. I can relate to some things that you're saying. No, so go forward, but also is, how did you, until you found your own feet, if I want to use those words, how did you deal with it mentally?
I'll go back to the institution first of all. You know, growing up there, it was a very strict environment. It was very religious orientated. We were constantly, you know, told that we were there because of the sins of my fallen mother. It was always like, your fallen mother. And the father was never really brought into that equation. And we were being punished for their sins. So we were at mass. It felt like there was bells ringing for 5 o'clock a.m. afternoon, benediction. It just went on and on and on. Children hungry, children crying, going up a cold avenue up to a little church, trying to, cleanse ourselves of these sins from our fallen mothers. But we made rosary beads on a daily basis, and the mechanical just effects of that, like holding, can you imagine a small little child holding a pliers in one hand and a roll of wire in the other, stringing beads on, and just making rosary beads in a very dull room, no pictures, no music, just children trying to finish their quota of rosary beads. We had to make a dozen a day once you will say qualified at making decades. A decade actually is 10 beads a decade, and it takes 60 decades to make a dozen rosary beads, because there's 5 decades on each rosary. I don't know if you've ever looked at a set of rosary beads, but I would know all of those things, plus medal, plus chain, plus the whole thing, and the cross. That was very difficult for children to do. It was very painful. We developed welts on our little hands, which would become septic. And when they became septic, you were sent to a medicine cabinet in a corridor, and they had their so-called nurse. I don't know if she was a qualified nurse, but her only job really was to take a piece of cotton wool from a roll, and she'd hold your little hand. She would take the cotton wool and rip the welt from your hand to expose just the raw skin underneath, place a plaster over it, and then we'd be sent back to our room to make the rosary beads. And that was a continuous job, you could say, for children. And most of the time, like, we were hungry. Obviously I made friendships, but at the same time you had to be very careful, even with, because the system was designed like the smaller children learn from the bigger children, but the bigger children would also learn how to steal the smaller children's rosaries in order to finish their quota. So it was a constant battle of watching yourself, very much like prison, I would imagine. If you have cigarettes, if you're a smoker,
I was going to say, yeah. It's
very much like that. The regime was very, very strict. If you were in separate rooms where you couldn't, say, leave for a glass of water if you were thirsty, we devised schemes to take water from a toilet cistern. So one child would pull the chain, the old cisterns, we'd pull the chain, and we'd cup our hands and catch the water as it came down into the bowl to drink water. And on other occasions, if the lay staff, they were people who were employed, they could also be people who had grown up there and never left, would become staff or lay people, as we refer to them. Whatever food they didn't eat from their own fancy dining rooms would be put into a bowl that was hovered out of a high window over a little yard we were allowed into every now and again. And there was one particular lay person who, for me, I think she was mentally disturbed, is the only way I can describe her. How she ever became a kitchen staff member or in charge of children is just beyond anything I can come up with. But she would hover the basin of old scraps out the window, overlooking the yard, and pretend to dip it. So the children were already scrambling for
waiting
food,
to grab some food,
like scavengers. Like, if you throw bread out, especially here in Newbridge, we have crows. We have a lot of crows, blackbirds. If you throw bread out, they come down and they scurry. Well, that's what we looked like. She would be constantly calling us savages, brats. Look at them, they're disgusting. But we behaved that way because that was all we knew. That was how we fought for bread, just to eat some food. Yes, they gave us breakfast. Yes, they gave us dinner. Yes, they gave us a cup of cocoa.
And what kind of breakfast or dinner would they give you? Was it just
it was so minimal. If you imagine, like, working very hard all day, and the only thing you've had that morning is a slice of bread and cocoa, then you have to wait for a bell to ring for a tiny bowl of what I would call lumpy potato that wasn't cooked properly, with maybe little stalks of cabbage kind of stalks. Nothing was ever nutritious or exciting to look at. It was very mediocre. It was very bland, very tasteless. And for myself, I didn't like the food. You know, it was very hard to eat food that you just, I mean, you look at children today, if they refuse to eat food, even when they're hungry, it felt a lot like that. And I also lived in fear when eating, because this particular lay person was always hovering around. So I felt I was very frightened of her, and being frightened suppressed my appetite a lot. Now, when you got to your little table, if you weren't fast enough, a bigger child could take it. And that didn't matter to the lay staff. You missed out. So a lot of the time you were hungry, even though they had put food on your table. So in the evening time, then you'd probably have a slice of bread and jam and cocoa. So it really wasn't enough to sustain good energy levels. We were tired. We were working very hard. The days were so dull. There was nothing to stimulate the children. When you weren't making rosary beads, we were also in charge. We all had chores. My chore was scrubbing a corridor near the boys' dormitory called St. Michael's. It was very long. It had white and black tiles. And the white tiles could show all the scuff marks. The black tiles were okay. But to a child, the corridor looked like a big T-junction. So it went down one length and then turned like that. And I probably started scrubbing floors from the age of 6, 7. And that was my job. It was my job to do that. And this lay person happened to be in charge of that as well, and was constantly on my back, constantly pushing me over. If I missed a square, she'd pick up the bucket of dirty water and fling it at me. And I learned to duck and dive, to avoid the tin bucket hitting me. And when the bucket would empty its contents again, I'd have to re-clean and soak up all that with the old floor cloths, and little hands trying to twist the floor cloth to get the excess water out of it after making rosary beads, especially if you had a welt that wasn't healed very well, was extremely painful, very, very painful.
It's very, you said it yourself, it sounds like prison.
Mm-hmm.
And young people to do that and then be put down. How was we'll move forward, but back even then, how did you deal with the mental health? Because that must have affected in a shocking way.
Yes. During my years in Goldenbridge, I had to suppress everything and get on with it. My mental health began to unravel as a teenager, as a young adult, and into later life. I didn't know about mental health. I didn't know that when I was sleeping all day, not eating, hurting my body with a blade, I didn't know that was mental health issues. I'd never been taught to ask for help. I never understood anything because I was alone. I had nobody to run to. I had nobody to ask questions of. I did meet people along the way who obviously noticed things and did their best to help, but I never spoke out. I never asked for help. My mental health showed itself even while holding down a job. I could work from Monday to Friday, say, and then from Friday to Sunday, I would walk the streets of Dublin. I would end up in St. Stephen's Green Park, and I would scream at passers-by while cutting myself underneath my coat with a Wilkinson sword blade. The Wilkinson sword blade and cutting was to relieve the anxiety that I was feeling because I didn't understand that I was actually crying out for help. I didn't understand that the trauma that had been inflicted on me already was unraveling. It was like, you could say, liken it to a volcano. I was constantly trying to push it down. And the only way I could push it down was by hurting myself. It started with pinching. It started in Goldenbridge with pinching so that I could keep my mouth closed. The pinching helped me to keep my voice silent. So my mental health, you could say, was a volcanic eruption during my my teenage adolescence. It was very evident. I had suicide attempts, and
I was going to ask you, what was the like, just what you're talking about? I don't want to go into and answer any questions you want, but when was the first time you told, and how many times did you think about suicide? As in despair, in despair.
Yes. Well, I was living in many different flats throughout Dublin, alone as a teenager. It's a very silent and very lonely place when you're a young person. I would look out the window for hours on end thinking, I have nobody, I have no one to talk to, I have nobody to communicate with. There was a doctor who was local in Rathmines, so around that place, who was actually my employer's doctor, who would give me tablets. He would say it was for sickness. I would just down them. I learned how to buy stuff in chemists, and I would take them like Smarties. I didn't think of the consequences. I didn't think that I was trying to commit suicide, but I just thought, well, if they make me sleep, if I can go to sleep and not have any thoughts, that would be something that, at least I would have. Sleep would be my comfort. Sleep would be something where
you were looking for an escape.
Yeah.
Escape from reality.
I was trying to escape from reality. And then when I did learn about suicide, when I started to understand what suicide was, I thought, that's an option. That was a very serious option for me, because what else was there? The one thing I think with the nuns in Goldenbridge, there was a terrible fear in me of the devil. So suicide attempts, I would think about, what if I don't go to heaven? What if I end up in this place called purgatory and I'm there forever? I had fears like that. But after 2 or 3 tablets, 4 tablets, 5 tablets, those thoughts seemed to just diminish a little bit, because they would be taking effect. And before you knew it, my very first attempt, I was a teenager in a flat in Dublin, and I was drifting. I do remember the feeling of drifting, and it was nice. And then someone knocked on the bloody door. And it startled me. And I opened the door, and there was a young gentleman there who lived in the flat. I used to only see him coming and going. He was nothing to do with me. He just lived in another part of the building. But he had locked himself out. So it must have been late at night that this was happening. I had chosen late at night. And he apologized and said, I've locked myself out. Could you, because I'm very, very small and very, very thin and very, very emaciated looking. Could you climb through my window? He said, my back door is open. If you could get in there and open my front door. But he noticed something about me. I wasn't myself. And I think I may have almost collapsed. And he called a doctor. He called somebody. And when I came to, when I came to, he was sitting at the end of my bed. And I had little flashbacks of another man giving me an injection, but not much memory of what had happened. I think the doctor thought that this person was my boyfriend or partner, and just asked him to watch over me for the rest of that evening, but he had given me something. And this guy didn't get into his flat that night. He had to stay in my flat. That's an apartment now, they call it. We called it, because they would just one room.
That's like right.
It's all very fancy now, isn't it? But he didn't ask me many questions. He just asked if I was all right. I put on my that demeanor that hides everything again. And I said, oh, sorry about that. I must have had too much, whatever. And I climbed through his door was locked. I climbed through a bathroom window that he had left open, got into his flat and opened his door. He said, thank you. And I went back about my business as if nothing had happened, and carried on then for another while, having almost killed myself. So in the book I write the strangest things, like when I had these suicidal attempts, it's almost like they were interrupted. So I would always be calling out to the God that these nuns had preached about. Please, can you please help me? Please do something. Please, you know, why is this happening to me? You know, and it's only years later I look at it that the gentleman who knocked on my door was probably sent by, you know, that's my way of reasoning it, because there were other occasions in my life where very similar things happened like that. You know, I'd go from these extreme emotions to taking something or drinking too much. I did go down that road as well. I would drink myself into oblivion. That helped. I tried substances, you know, back in the day it was called dope, I think, or, you know, there was all these names. I didn't know.
They still call it dope now. You're not out of touch.
Do they? Marty, you're well versed. I didn't know that. But yes, right. When I started to find things like that, that sort of gave me another world to live in, then it did give me respite, I suppose, from my very dark thoughts, because I started to blame myself for everything that was happening to me. I believed what the nuns had said. I believed what the lay people had told me, that I was worthless, that I was the result of sin, basically, that I should be punished. So I began to believe all of those thoughts as well, that I was useless. I really was. That's how it felt. You know, I do not have those thoughts.
Had no self, you felt you had no self-worth, because that's what they put into you.
Yes.
Like, that's, sorry, I'm blown away with your story here, and I know my audience will be.
Well, Marty, look at it this way. You know, I was a very, very small child, and children like are open to what the adults tell them. If the nuns had told me that a Christmas tree was God, I would have believed the Christmas tree was God and probably adored it. It's just the way. It's like brainwashing, you could say. And I did believe. So I think that child in me, during catechism classes, when they did tell stories about the Bible, I was genuinely fascinated with this other world. I didn't know that the stories they told were of people who actually lived on Earth. In my fantasy world, it was another world that I could reach out to. And I believed in like in the book, I talk about the 3 children of Fatima. I thought, if I pretend I'm one of those children, excuse me, maybe God will look at me and think, oh, look at that child. She's one of the 3 children. Let's send angels down. They'll make the rosary beads for her. I believed in things like that. I still have a very spiritual connection to this day, that things happen. I'm here for a reason. I've gone through all of that. I've gone through 2 marriages. My first husband died suddenly, but I did love that man. Excuse me. I'll just take some water, Marty, if that's okay.
No, you're okay. Yeah.
Yes. I upped and left sticks to run away from Ireland because I had begun to tell lies, a lot of lies, white lies now. I don't mean I'm a compulsive liar or anything like that, but to protect myself. People were asking me questions all the time. How come you live in a flat? How come, you know, where's your parents? Where do you live? Where have you come from? Where did you go to school? I didn't want to answer those questions because I had this huge, huge shame that I carried, that life, you know, would expose me as a child from a fallen woman, a child of sin, a child who was no good. So rather than say I was that child, I made up stories. Just like my first job, when my employer asked me where did I go to school, I kind of made Goldenbridge sound like a fancy place. Oh, St. Vincent's School in Inchicore. I left out the Goldenbridge Industrial bit. Oh, that's good. How well did you do, he said, in your exams? I said, just off the top of my head, I got 7 honours. Did you now? I said, yes. Can you type? I did. I actually could type a little bit. I said, I'm very good. He said, well, I'll give you a test. And if excuse the language, but I shot myself.
Yeah.
He had a little typewriter, an old Remington steel typewriter in his office. And he said, I will read out a couple of lines. Will you type them for me? Thank God I was able to type it. He spoke quite slowly. It was when he said, can you do shorthand? And I said, yes. He said, right, leave the typewriter now. I want you to write this. I hadn't got a clue what shorthand was. Shorthand. Shorthand. This is how I thought. A little hand. Marty, he read out a couple of sentences and I wrote as fast as I could and managed to scrape from memory what he had said. And he said, well done. I'll give you a 3-month trial. And I secured that job. That job saved my life. That job was the reason I was able to afford a flat. That job was the reason I was able to clothe myself and feed myself, although I didn't feed myself properly.
You had to be the parent of yourself.
I was my only parent. I was my my guardian. I was the keeper of everything for me.
Yeah.
And you know, some lovely people did come into my life. Some I now see them as angels. I didn't know it at the time. I thought they were interfering busybodies, if that's, you know, correct to say. But how I got my first flat, Marty, when I left Goldenbridge, I was sent straight to my father's home. It was very dysfunctional and it was very chaotic. And my father was an alcoholic. He had come back into our lives when I was 10 years of age. I hadn't seen him for 10 years, but I was expected by the institution to go to his home and take care, help out, not take care, help out with babysitting in his new family and the children that were being born into that marriage. But I couldn't cope after leaving Goldenbridge and arriving at my father's home. I couldn't cope with the chaos. And it was just a 2 up, 2 down. You may know what a corporation house is. It was just a 2 up, 2 down. And poverty was, you know, it was evident. There was broken windows. There was, you know, the poor mammy was doing her best when he arrived home with whatever little money he had collected from the dole. She did her best to feed her children, to clothe her children. And then there's me on top of all of that. So I basically got up in the middle of the night when the house was silent and everyone was asleep. I just got up out of bed, took the few belongings I had, and I walked down the street where we lived, and I crossed over a bridge, and I made a decision at the end of that bridge. Will I go left or will I go right? And when I ran away from Goldenbridge as a child, I went, will I go left or will I go right? And I went left that time when I was a child. So when I was this teenager, I decided I'll go right and see what happens. And that was a good choice because I walked the streets. I know it must have been after 12 at night. It must have been winter time. It was very cold. And I knocked on doors. And I came to a house, there was a light on, and I did knock on the door. And to my surprise, an elderly lady answered. She didn't ask, I just said, I'm really sorry for knocking on your door. I've nowhere to sleep. And I think rather than have the door open and feel the cold herself, she said, just step inside. And she said, what's a child? She called me a child. I hadn't really been called a child up until this point. I didn't see myself as a child. I had worked all my life as this child who I felt, you know, quite adept at most things, quite ignorant as well and naive, but doing what I was doing. And she said, well, look, I can give you a bed for the night. And she did. She didn't ask me many questions. The following morning, she knocked on the door. She came into the room with a little plate and there was little orange. She had peeled an orange and segmented it, you know, and came in and sat on the bed. And she said, now, it was late last night, but she said, what were you doing out at that time of night? And I just said I had nowhere to sleep. I did say at one point, there's too many people in the house. I couldn't, I had nowhere to sleep. So she said,
and what age were you there, Susan? What age were you at that time?
I had turned 16 at this stage. I was 16.
God, just a child.
Yes, so she was calling me a child, but I didn't know I was a child. I did not know I was a child. I blurted out quite quickly. I said, look, I have a job, I can pay you, thinking I could live with this woman. And she said, well, no. She said, actually, my son has just bought a place across the road. He's renovated it into these little maisonettes. They're one-room apartments. I'll contact him if you have a job. She said, how much are you earning? I didn't lie here because the money, I was earning £8, 3 shillings and 10 pence, something like that. I remember it. And she said, well, I'll contact him. He arrived at her house. He said, he didn't ask me many questions. He just knew I had a job. And he brought me across the road, showed me the flat. It was one room. There was one nice window there. There was a bed in the corner. There was an armchair. There was a kitchen that was behind a cupboard. You know, you open a press like that. And the kitchen was behind that. A little geezer.
Kitchenette.
A kitchenette, yes. It's part of everything was designed in one room, you could say. There was a little table and chair for whatever. And he said, can you afford £4? And obviously I'd have to pay the electricity, which was run on a meter. The meter, you had to put money into a meter, like a shilling into a meter to keep it going. I very quickly learned how to stop the meter from working by putting a magnet on it. And the magnet would stop the needle from moving. And I would just put a couple of shillings every 2 weeks for when he came around to collect the money from the meter. And he'd say, you mustn't be home all that often, he'd say. And I'd say, no, I have friends, I spend a lot. I'm only really sleeping here. You know, they're the kind of little white lies that got me by, and I kept a few bob in my pocket because I needed the money for my drinking habit and to, you know, to get about and to feed. I didn't feed myself very well. I didn't really have any skills in the cooking department, so I lived on.
And Susan, just to move on because we're running out of time soon, but why did you give up drinking? What made you give up drinking?
Thankfully, I never became an alcoholic. You could say that because I could stop drinking if I wanted to. Drinking only gave me an outlet at weekends. Drinking just gave me a place to go, like a pub. You know, it just gave me a place to go rather than being in a flat alone on my own as a teenager. But thankfully, I never became an alcoholic. I've never been an alcoholic. I could drink and stop. And I didn't like the effects the alcohol had on me anyway. As I got older, I didn't like the effects. I'm not what we call a seasoned drinker now. I find 1 glass of wine, 2 glasses of wine at the most, and my head hurts. I like, you know what I mean? So I like a meal now. I've discovered the beauty of having a lovely meal and a nice glass of wine and good conversation. That's my guilty pleasure now, you could say. So thankfully I never became an alcoholic. That's your guilty pleasure.
And do you stay in touch with your siblings?
Yes, I do indeed. I would say that I would say I'm very private though as well. When there's an event, say if there's a wedding, if there's a funeral, I'm happy to be in those situations. I think I've probably built a wall around myself to protect myself as well, because now that the book is out, you know, this particular book here, Echoes from the Dormitories. Now that the book is out.
Yes, we've flashed it up there now, guys.
Oh,
yes.
Now that the book is out as well, I've told my truth, and obviously I have concerns. I told it in a way not to hurt anyone. It's my story as it unfolded for me throughout my life. I am getting closer to some siblings than I am with others. They all have their own lives. They're all doing their own thing. Obviously, we're much older now. So as life moves on, probably the distance is probably getting bigger and bigger as well. You know, my main concern is my own family, my son, my grandchildren, and remaining, you know, in a very close, healthy relationship with them. And it's a joy to see how my grandchildren are growing. I have 2 granddaughters, and it's a real joy to see happy children, happy, normal children living very exquisite, happy lives. That's what brings...
You never got that, Susan, but you know, with your book, I'm sure your grandkids and you're very proud of what you've done, because it takes a lot of guts to speak out. And I understand. I'm sure you sat on that book for years, as you alluded to earlier. It takes a lot to get it out, and then you're worried about if you're going to hurt somebody. But I
Exactly.
think
But
you've achieved that.
Marty, it all began, my writing, I enjoyed writing poetry, funnily enough. Now, when I say I enjoyed poetry, it wasn't fancy, airy, fairy stuff. It was very deep, emotional stuff. And I found that I was writing my trauma into poems. I found it easier. And then I decided, to join a drama class up in Dublin when my second marriage ended. And there was an outlet there to be creative. And I found that I was quite good at putting together little short plays for the Christmas shows. I found I had a little niche there. So I decided to do some writing courses, intensive writing courses, which put me out of my comfort zone. And then I thought, you know what? I'd like to, I was invited by Professor Emily Pine as part of a survivor group to go to UCD and record my story for their historical archives. And I thought, and I connected with this lady. She was interested in my story because I was able to tell it. I hadn't spoken for so many years, but it was all there. It was all in my little writing. It was all there. And I said to her, I'd love to write my story as a play, an actual play for the theatre. And she said, why don't you? That never occurred to me. You see, there's a lot of times in my life where I don't realize I can do something. It's almost I'm waiting for permission. So I did write a play. I have a play written. It's fully drafted. I believe it's really, really good. It's called Bring Them In. I had
We're
an
just
opportunity.
flashing that up there now, the one you sent me.
Yes.
Yeah. Why did you name it that, first of all?
I'll tell you why I named it that. I tell you why I named it that.
I find it fascinating. I was really curious because, I like.
Yes, you could look at it two ways. You can look at it two ways. 3 small children arrived at Goldenbridge. We were forcibly held while other children were being brought back into the institution after spending their holidays with their relatives, or a lady and man, as they were referred to then. That's a couple who might take a child out for a short stay. We were held, and the first words I remember, sister, I won't say her name, bring them in. That's why I called it Bring Them In. Bring them in. That's as simple as that.
You weren't a person. You didn't get names. Bring John, Jim, Jojo, whatever.
No, bring them in.
Bring them in.
Yes, bring them in. We were given numbers as our registration numbers. I was 85. My brother David was 58, the other way around. And Michael was number 23. And those numbers stayed with us until we left Goldenbridge. Now, the children would call us by our names, but any staff member, any lay person, anybody above us, so to speak, we were numbers. We were called by our numbers. We reported as numbers. If a bell rang and a number 85 was called for, I knew that was me. I would have to report to the head nun's office, number 2, so on and so forth. And I only give my number and my brother's numbers in the book. I don't. I do know some of my former inmates' numbers, but I decided they have names. That we are real people. We have names. When I was leaving Goldenbridge and I was called back for some advice, sister said to me, get back here, 85. It's like I can flash back to that moment. Get back here, 85. She was already after telling me to leave, but she wanted to give me some advice. She said, now when you leave here, she said, because I think you're man mad. I remember that. If you're going to be with a man, or you have to be with a man, she said, or you're going to sit on his lap, make sure to put a newspaper between you. Now that was my sex education. And she said, off with you, 85. And I don't know what happened in me that very second when she said, off with you, 85. I turned around and said, you know what? My name is Susan. Can you hear that, Susan? And I said it 3 times. My name is Susan. And then I just walked out the door. I don't think she really cared where I was going, but I walked out the door. But you know what? I had a feeling of empowerment in that moment.
Yeah.
My name is Susan.
You got it out there. You're a person, not a number, as you said at the start.
Yes.
You've gone through enough, as we said it, but to be able, don't call me a number. That's just, as you said, a prisoner.
Yeah.
I want something, come over. I am Susan. That's my name.
I'm
It's
Susan.
hard to say. And what I
Yes.
don't get is back then, just listen to you, is I get worried. Those people, as in I'm talking about the people that were supervisors or whatever, or the nuns or whatever, didn't they have a conscience that
Well, they couldn't have. I think they were all psychotic. I think what happened in those days, especially with children like myself and my brothers, we didn't have family for 10 years. We had nobody we could tell. And I
no,
think they saw the fear in us and it gave them some kind of power over us. Like if they said jump, literally, like we would jump. I would jump forever if they told me to jump. If they told me to clean that, well, I'll give you a little small snippet of one thing that happened to me. Sister was passing through a room that I had been cleaning and she said, that floor is not spotless. I want you to sweep it. And I carried on sweeping that floor every day for months on end, every single day, because she didn't tell me to stop. I didn't know that I only had to sweep it the one time she told me to. I was waiting for her to come back and inspect the floor. And anyone who walked through that room and made it dirty, I got obsessed with the fact that they're bringing dirt into the room and I'm going to be in trouble for
and
this.
she's going to give out to you.
So yes, so I carried on sweeping that floor. One day, it was a summer day, I recall, and she was passing through again and she said, what are you doing here? And I said, you told me to sweep the floor. But she had forgotten that she had told me to sweep the floor. And she said, get outside and finish. Do you know what I mean? So it gives you an idea of the control that they had over us and the fear we had of them, that I didn't know to stop sweeping that floor. Every day when I saw dirt on that floor, I found the sweeping brush and I'd sweep it and sweep it. And no matter how many times you try sweeping your floor, no matter how many times you sweep it, you'll always find more. And that's what my child self kept finding. I kept finding more dirt. And I thought she'll never be happy. So I carried on. And that it gives you a little indication of the power they had over us. And I think they enjoyed that power. It got,
Well,
you know.
we're going to be finishing up on time, but I want to ask you what you're saying. Oh my God, I know my listeners are going to love this episode, but what gave you the strength to do what? How did you get through it? In other words, people that might be going through it happen. It still happens in certain circumstances.
Yes. Yeah. As I got older and my last marriage ended, I think it was when that ended, it's almost like I had a place to start to become myself. I thought, I'm here for a reason. I have to be here for a reason. I have talents. I just hadn't tapped into them at that point. People would say to me, you're very good at talking. You're very good at telling a story. You're very good. And I think, how are they seeing that in me? You know? And when the opportunities arose up in the Christine Buckley Centre, which is a place of support for survivors, and I met other people like myself who a lot of them hadn't moved forward. And somehow I had. And I believed, looking back over my life, there were angels in my life. I was being carried somehow. Something was happening in my life and things would fall into place. But I thought, I'm not going to go through all of that for nothing and then go and meet my maker. And I, what was that all about? Tell me what that was for. So when I started to really put my trauma into poetry and then began to write a play, COVID came along during the play when I had the play written, and the theatres were closed, but I still had the itch for writing. I couldn't stop, and it was very quiet. I just began to write my own story, my truth story, rather than tell it as a tale in a play. I began to tell it as a personal story. And somewhere in there, I thought, oh, I think this is what God wants. He wants me to tell my story, because there's lots of people out there who have suffered, who have gone through similar, maybe in different ways, but they have suffered and they probably don't know how to tell their story. They probably don't know how to voice it. Listen, if I can do it without an education, I don't have certificates, Marty. I made them all up. If I can do it and just be honest and raw about it, there's hope. Everybody matters. Everybody's story matters, Marty. Everybody matters.
All I can say is you're an inspiration, and I'm intrigued, and I wish we had another 5 hours, and I'm sure you come back. But I'm in awe of what you've done and what you've gone through. I mean, I have my own story, but what you've gone through, but the way you're very positive, and I'm delighted you said that as an you deserve, as you said, what you brought. You deserve, if you go through that, you deserve, and the reason you're speaking that, and your book, absolutely amazing, is you're helping other people because they read that, whether it's just in that industrial school or in some other schools, can be Australia, New Zealand, America. They understand, and it'll give them a bit of comfort, and hopefully I love that will speak out. And it's not just that. I had Kieran Breville on from Limerick, that he wrote a book, and he was in industrial school.
Yes.
Sean Hennessy, where the Irish kid, they come over here to Australia, and the girls, you know. But I think you're, what you're alluding to is, don't be silent. Speak out.
Don't be silent. I was silent for too long. Now, maybe the timing wasn't right. The timing is right now. The timing felt right when I was writing it. I could have carried on writing forever. And I decided to write a poem at the end of my book because, firstly, I'm going to meet my maker one day, okay? But I wrote a poem and I thought, I lived in corridors, I lived in dormitories.
Are you able to, can you recite the poem for my listeners?
Oh my gosh, I'd love to if we have time to do that.
I'd love to.
I would absolutely love to.
Love to.
I'd love to, and I'd love to share it. It's called The Last Corridor. So you see, as a child, everything was corridors and running through corridors to escape, running and hiding. So I call it The Last Corridor. So you have to imagine that I've passed on. Okay, I've gone to the other side.
Yep.
I hope you'll remember me when I've gone away. For the tales that I shared on the airwaves each day. No passport, no license, no suitcase to pack. Just me, unbeliever, my white horse riding back. Shouting, Geronimo, my spear raised high. I'll whisper your name as I pass through the sky. No walls will confine me. No doors will be closed. I'll gallop through corridors that nobody knows. I'll shed all my worries, my fears, and my doubts, and greet my Creator, voice clear and devout. I'll ask, why the sorrows, the wounds that I had borne? And if truth is the answer, I'll dance evermore. You might hear me laughing, let light as a flame, calling old friends, remembering their names. Unbeliever, I'll ride through stars ever bright, and at last see my story in the clearest of light.
Susan, you're amazing. I know that comes from the heart, and you're just, I'm telling you now, I think you're, and I know my listeners, you're absolutely adorable. You're so honest, and I know you'll still carry what happened in the industrial school, but you know what? You've risen above. You said the story about that you've risen above all of them. That's what you've done.
I have indeed, Marty. I have found my true self. I have found my voice, and my voice cannot be quiet. It can't be quiet anymore. I will go on talking. I've been invited to read a little piece from my book at Trinity College somewhere in the next few weeks. and I will stand up there tall, and I will read, and I will talk and talk and talk. There's no shutting up now.
Susan, please don't ever shut up. And you've got a great heart. You know, my listeners are listening. You've got the way you explain things, and you don't feel sorry for yourself.
Oh, gosh, no.
You accepted what happened and your life, but you're going to help other people. And I can't say that it's just been such a privilege to have you on the show.
Marty, thank you so much for inviting me.
Oh no, it's been a delight for me and an honor. And I know for my listeners, and we're gonna just when I'm finished off, I'm going to put up some stuff, and then obviously the connection and the description, the full thing, and the book and everything. But can I say to you, Susan, thank you so much.
Oh, thank you very much, Marty. And hello to all your listeners as well. And, you know, live your life. Enjoy each day. Don't worry about tomorrow.
That's right. And you just told, I think, everyone that is, don't suck on what the past was. You know what? Someone said when I was doing the story, I got interviewed, Susan, and they said, oh, you had a hard life. I said, did I? I thought it was normal. It's the same thing.
Yes,
and look at you now. Look what you're doing. And I can't wait. And we're looking forward to your book. And
it can be purchased on Amazon. It can be purchased on Amazon UK at the moment. I'm doing some book signings here in my own town, so I have books in a local shop, but it can be purchased online through Amazon UK.
Yeah, it's just flashing up there now.
Thank you.
Yeah, Susan, thank you so much.
Thank you, Marty. I appreciate it.
A pleasure. And thank you to our listeners and audience here in Australia, New Zealand, and all over the world. And go to Life Stories on our main channel, moralinjuryinternational.com. moralinjuryinternational.com, and we'll see you on the next episode. Susan, good night and thank you.
Good morning from here.
Yeah, that's right.